Can I get deleted files when I do a logical copy? Of course I'm going to say yes. Why else would I be doing this video otherwise? In this video, we will be looking at using FTK Imager to image a media item, and then looking at the nuances of the difference between the levels of media that you're going to be pointing to. Please help me out by hitting the subscribe button so I can determine your truth. FTK Imager is a very popular free tool for digital forensics imaging and previewing. You can download it from the link in the description below. And for more information on FTK Imager, you can watch this video here. So I'm going to connect a USB thumb drive to my exam machine and then use FTK Imager to point to that physical device. I'm going to click up here in the menu for Add Evidence Item. And then at the Select Source pop-up panel, I'm going to choose the physical drive instead of logical drive. If you choose a logical drive, you will only see that one partition that is mounted. And if that partition is not mounted, then you won't see any partitions. Plus, if the partition is something that Windows doesn't understand, like ext4 or HFS+, then you won't even see that logical drive to mount. After selecting physical drive, use the drop-down to choose the USB thumb drive and click Finish. In the evidence tree pane, you will now see the physical drive that you chose. Go ahead and click into it so it expands out. You can also use the arrow keys to go down and then it will expand as well. And we can see what's on that drive. In my case, I have a main data partition and then some unpartitioned space. I'm going to go ahead and expand out the main data partition to see what's in there. And then again, expand out the name of the partition within it. And then continue until we see the root of the file system. And it's going to be named bracket root end bracket. There isn't actually a folder in my USB thumb drive called bracket root bracket. It is basically just the placeholder for the root of that device. Now you see that there are 4 levels of the disk that we can click into before we can get to the point where we see actual files. So level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what's the difference between these 4 levels and which one should I click on when I want to get an image? So the answer is it depends. Let's start at the top, the physical drive itself. If you click on the Properties tab down here in this pane, you can see that we are looking at the entire physical drive, right? Because it shows you the drive geometry and the physical drive information and whatnot. So if we select this item and then we right-click on it, we get a pop-up menu that allows us to do a few things. We can remove that evidence item. We can verify the drive image. We can export the disk image. We can mount that image, or we can export a directory listing. Since we're dealing with imaging in this video, let's go ahead and select the Export Disk Image option. And then the Create Image panel pops up. This is where it's going to let us go ahead and click the Add button, right, which tells the program where the image destination is going to be. The next thing that FTK Imager will ask you is to select the destination image type. We have 4 to choose from: RAW or DD, the SMART format, the E01 format, or the AFF format. So basically selecting from the top level of a device will allow you to image the entire device, and the output is going to be a physical disk image, such as a DD image or an E01 image. Well, we're not going to go ahead and actually image anything, so let's go ahead and cancel to get back to the main screen. And then now we're going to go to the second level, which is the first partition. So once again, let's take a look at the properties pane over here. You see that we're looking at the partition. As you can see, the starting sector offset and the sector count, right? So these are clues that now you're looking at a particular partition instead of the whole disk. Now, when we right-click on the partition, the menu allows us to do a few things. It allows us to export a disk image, mount the image, export a directory listing, And once again, let's select the export disk image. And at the create image panel that pops up, I'm going to hit the add button again. And then once again, we get the choices of raw, smart, E01, and AFF. The difference now is that this image is not going to be the entire disk. It is only going to be a disk image of the selected partition, which may be significantly smaller than the entire disk, right, depending on how this drive is partitioned. All right, let's cancel out again until we get back to the main screen. And this time we're going to select the third layer, or basically the partition that contains the file system. If you look at the properties pane, you see that we are now looking at the file system because you see the cluster size, cluster count, volume labels, etc. This is typical of a NTFS partition. If we were looking at a ext4 or a PFS partition, those would be different properties. Now if I right click, the menu looks very different. We are presented with the options to export files, export file hash list, export a logical image, which puts it in an AD1 container, or we can add to a custom content image, which again is basically AD1 container. Now, since we're at a level of the media that does not support physical imaging, we only have choices for logical copies. If you choose the export files option, this will prompt you for the destination folder to place all the files. So I don't recommend this export method because in the forensics world, we are much better off creating a container like the AD1 and then putting the files into it. Then we can hash the container, and as we move it around, we can maintain integrity of all the files within. And the other thing is if you do the export files options, the created and modified date stamps for the folders that are created are now going to be the current date and time stamps, right? It is no longer going to be whatever the original is. So you are losing information, basically. And if you do the export logical image option, this is going to create an AD1 from all the files, including deleted files, orphan files, and also unallocated space, and put all of that into an AD1 container. The last option of the add to customer content image option allows you to select only files and folders of interest to you and then put those into an AD1 container. And note that if you use that option, you can actually put files from different devices into one AD1 container if you wish. So once again, let's go ahead and hit the cancel button to back out of the main screen. And so now lastly, we're going to click on the fourth level or the bracket root folder. If you look at the properties pane, now what we can see here is that we're looking at the root of the file system, right? And you can also see the files here on the right-hand side. If we right-click on that folder, we see the options for the logical exports. And the main difference here is that at this level of the device, we will not be extracting any data from the unallocated space of this partition. So depending on whether you want to obtain a physical or logical image, whether you want a specific partition, or whether you care to obtain unallocated space, you can choose one of the levels of the media device to image. Keep in mind that the trade-off is physical versus logical for thoroughness, and then speed of imaging and size of the output. Now the AD1 containers are readable by FTK Imager itself, and also AD Lab, right, the tool that is created by Access Data, the same creator as FTK Imager. You can also read in AD1s with X-Ways, Autopsy, Paladin, and even 7-Zip. For more information on FTK Imager, you can watch this video here. Make sure that you click on the blue monkey to subscribe. Thanks for your time and happy hunting.